Welcome to Boring Conversation, a Malifaux podcast.
Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of Boring Conversation. So today I have a returning guest, John Fox, otherwise known as the Mad Scientist of Malifaux. I'm not sure if you're the one that came up with that title or if someone else did, but I would say it's very fitting. So how you doing today, John?
I'm doing pretty good. I think Cody was the one that kind of like cemented it, so we'll go with it.
Yeah, you and I kind of have a tendency to throw some wild looking lists around on the Bayou chat in particular. So,
Oh yeah,
and John's the one that comes up with the wildest shit, so I can definitely attest to his mad scientist.
well we have I'm always in the Swamp Fiend Discord, and it's affectionately known as the Snowflake Discord, just because there's just so much ridiculous stuff, and somehow like I'm still throwing out the weirdest fucking lists even in that. So
Yeah, I'm
or
very interested to see what sort of fucking wacky shit that you come up with in Explorer Society now that you've got an
oh.
entire new faction to play with.
I have actually done a pretty good job of staying away from it for right now. I want to kind of let everybody else do their thing, let them come up with what they feel are like their quote unquote like standard list. And as soon as those Jedza models come out, you better believe I have already put aside money for that box because it is gorgeous.
Dude, those lamplighters are so boss looking.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. And Jedza herself is just.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, Jedza, I mean, the whole box, like Austera and Twiggy look just phenomenal. I mean, come on now.
I'm very excited. I'm very excited.
Speaking of new models, as of today's Waldo's Weekly, we got a chance to take a look at the renders for the Bayou Bash stuff, and man, oh man, am I excited to crack into those models.
Yeah, I am too. I'm too. I've been chomping at the bit to talk about them too. So like the fact that we got to at least see one today, he's fantastic. Fluffernutter is, first of all, beautiful name, great looking model. The render for that model looks amazing, and he actually looks like a model that's going to do some work in Whizbang, which is exciting because that keyword needs a little bit of a kick. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, a little, yeah, needs a little love for sure. So I gotta ask a question. So Fluffernutter, I was always led to believe that Fluffernutter sandwiches were like a New England thing, but I had a hard time believing that. Do they exist in your part of the country? Is that a thing?
My wife is from Maine, so Fluffernutter is a big thing there. But we have Sheetz gas stations down here in North Carolina, and they have a Fluffernutter milkshake, which is one of the greatest things on earth. So I'm intimately familiar.
So can you get like regular old like Jif marshmallow fluff down
Yeah,
there?
yeah, you can get it in the
Have you
store.
ever taken that and combined it with peanut butter between two pieces of bread?
Absolutely, absolutely. But
Okay,
I'm
there
from
we
the
go.
South, so we have our own version of weirdness. Um,
Uh-oh.
a la
What do
the
you
king himself, Elvis Presley, peanut butter, banana, and Miracle Whip sandwich.
and Miracle Whip.
Miracle Whip. Can't be mayonnaise. Mayonnaise is gross. Miracle Whip.
I thought you were gonna say like pickles or some shit, but
Yeah.
no.
No, no,
So
no.
peanut butter, banana, and Miracle Whip, huh?
That's it. That's that's the
Have
one.
you consumed one of these things?
I probably ate one. I would say there was one summer I probably ate one almost every day of the summer because my dad just let me make whatever lunch I wanted to. So yeah,
I think the next time I go to the grocery store, I'm gonna have to buy the stuff for this.
it's pretty fantastic. It's a lot. Like as an adult, I can't eat a full one. Like it's a lot. Like it is really rich. But as a kid, fantastic.
I'll see if my daughter will knock that thing out. My daughter loves mayonnaise, but Miracle Whip, I don't think she's ever tried. So we'll give it a go. We'll give
All
it a
right,
go
all
this
right.
week. I've committed to it. So speaking of food and beer, which
Mhm.
is kind of what we're angling at now, what are you drinking tonight, John?
Well, I hate to say it, but I'm cheating on my normal beer tonight. We've already
Ooh,
discussed I'm a huge Guinness drinker, but my daughter was in. She brought some Yingling in. Yingling's pretty good, so I snagged one, and that's what I'm drinking tonight.
that ain't bad. I actually picked another stout to run counter to what I expected was going to be your Guinness. So tonight I'm drinking yeah, tonight I'm drinking an Allagash Black Belgian
Oof.
style stout made in Portland, Maine. So not too terribly far from me, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'd really like to get up to the Portland, Maine brewery, the Allagash Brewery.
Oh
It's sort of
yeah.
one of like my bucket list brewery destinations. So I think I'm probably going to do that this year once things kind of ease up a little bit with this whole damn COVID thing.
Well, yeah.
But
Whenever we travel, we can travel again. I'm gonna have to get up your way and see what you got brewing out there because I love a good home brewed beer.
yeah, yeah. There's plenty of homebrew to go around. That's for sure. I actually just brewed last weekend. I somehow managed to get an extra day off work, and I did a British pub ale, like a nice kind of
Nice.
low alcohol beer. Probably serve it on nitro on my kitchen tap. Should be good.
If you ever get a chance, there is a. I spent most of a year in Peru, and they have a beer that is. They have a base. They have a company called Cusqueña, and the base beer for Cusqueña is pretty good. I like it a lot, but they have one called Cusqueña Negro, which is a chocolate beer, and it is unbelievably good. And if it wasn't for the fact that it's damn near impossible to get in the States, at least my section of the States, I would probably pay ridiculous amounts of money to drink that beer. Like it's fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, there's actually one of the things that I've really been interested in doing for a while is a historic style beer, and I actually just picked up a book. It's sitting here. I'm looking right at it on my desk. It's called Ancient Brews: Discovered and Rediscovered and Recreated by Pat McGovern, and he worked with Dogfish Head Brewery in Delaware, and they put a bunch of like pottery shards and stuff like that they found at different archaeological digs around the world through a bunch of lab testing to figure out what the ingredients that went
Excuse me.
into the beers that were housed in them were. And
Hmm.
one of them is like a chocolate and chili beer from Mexico called
Ooh.
Theobroma, and that is something I've been interested in brewing for a while. So
That sounds pretty good. Well, if you ever had actual Mexican style chili, especially the Aztec style, they use
mhm.
dark chocolate in the chili, and it's fantastic. It's absolutely
Oh yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, definitely. I've used like dark chocolate in making a chili in the past, and yeah, I can definitely attest to that. It's good. Hey, I found a picture of your beer from Peru. How about
Oh
that?
yeah,
Cana
fantastic.
Negra. Yeah, cool. Anyway, enough
All
beer.
right.
Let's
So
talk
this is
Malifaux.
not a beer podcast. This is a Malifaux
This is
podcast.
not a beer podcast. I could talk about beer for a long time, but yes, it
Understood.
is indeed a Malifaux podcast. So we're titling this one "Commitment Issues," because we're going to talk a little bit about when to commit your models, when to commit your resources, when's too early, when's too late. But before we talk about that, and I think both you and I have some keywords that we've been sort of dabbling in and whatnot that will play into the conversation. So I guess I'll kind of start it off. What have I been playing lately? So while not directly related to the topic, on some of the other podcast episodes, like the crossover with the Schemes and Stones guys, obviously I've been playing a lot of English Ivan and the Umber crew. I don't need to talk about them anymore at this point because I've talked about them ad nauseum. Anybody who's listened to this podcast the last couple of episodes, or has seen me prattling on the you know Schemesons knows Discord or anywhere else knows that I've spent quite a bit of time playing Ivan. So great crew, love it. But besides that, I finally got my very first game in with Zoraida. And for somebody who's been
Nice.
playing Bayou since the beginning of second edition, for me to say that I finally got a game in with Zoraida is kind of amazing. And I kind of felt like I was cheating the whole time because, damn, that
Yeah,
is
she's
pure power right there.
she's a lot of good. Did you play her with Francisco or with Francois?
Yep, I did. I was playing against Pandora actually,
Cool.
which I thought was going to be a little bit of a messier matchup, but I did Juju for the Willpower 7, Francois. Um, Picked a bunch. I can't remember exactly what the rest of the crew was, but yeah, it. I expected Francois was going to go down like a punk with his Willpower 5 against all those simple duels, but he managed to stay up the whole game, and Juju did some major work. And I can't say that I'd take him every game, but yeah, it was something.
Frank makes you cry with I can't imagine like Frank with inferiority complex should whew, God Pandora would just fall over dead. That's a hard matchup for her, I think.
Yeah, Francois definitely had inferiority complex
Yeah.
because how can you not?
Against Pandora, it's a must.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I did a little bit of Zoraida. I've been kind of talking about doing like a janky dual master Bayou crew with Ma and Zip for months now, and I finally found a game that it was going to work in, and that was some kind of game, John. That was some kind of game.
Yeah. I do like the Mazip combo.
Yeah, come to find out, when Zip's melee and ranged attacks, because of the pit traps that Ma can drop, are suddenly doing, +1 damage and injured, and never mind being able to combine it with other sources of hazardous from Sparks and the Pork Chop. Yeah, Zip does a lot of damage, and picking somebody up and dropping them literally into the middle of a pit trap is pretty rude.
Yep, it sure is. And you can push him to get some free focus, and Zip with focus shots is going to hit hard anyway.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, when you have all those pit traps flying around, and it's a bad matchup for somebody if they're not prepped for it.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those crews that, like, I could pull it off against somebody really effectively, like, once.
Uh,
And
understood.
then, I mean, there's only so much you can do about Zip. Like, Zip just does what Zip wants to do, but at least they would be, somewhat more prepared and be very proactive about destroying the pit traps. And it's like, okay, well, that kind of pulls some of the teeth out of it. But yeah, it was a cool crew. And then, kind of the crew that plays directly into the topic of today's conversation is, I got myself back into 10 Thunders, which is what I had been kind of, starting on before Explorer Society came out. And I finally got my first Misaki game in. And I don't think I've had more fun in a game of Malifaux in recent memory. Misaki is incredible. And just the raw bullshit that she's able to pull off was, I mean, maybe I've just got stars in my eyes because I played this new master and had a great game with her. But good lord, we don't have any Misaki players around here. Nobody that I've ever gone and played against in a tournament has used her. So this was completely new to me. And I felt like I found the most busted negative play experience type thing that I've ever seen. And I play Bayou. So that's really saying something.
Yeah, Masaki can be. I guess I played Oliver Hedges once, who played Masaki against my Brewmaster, and I made the mistake of just not bringing any marker removal or anything. I just kind of played my base Brewmaster list, and I regretted it very, very badly. Um, Normally, Bayou does okay because they can start eating those markers pretty early, but yeah, if you just let Masaki run the board, it's a bad day. Like it's very hard to deal with.
Yeah, so needless to say, I'm going to be playing her quite a bit more. And when we're talking about learning when to commit your models, I mean, she pretty much epitomizes that with the way that her group
Absolutely.
plays out. So I'm looking forward to kind of talking about her in the context of that conversation. But that said, that's all the shit that I've been doing since the last time we had one of these style eps. So John, what have you been playing?
Well, I completely and totally scrubbed out on the January World Series. Um, 3 out of the 4 rounds were against Thunders, out of which I scored a total of 4 points. Turn one, like I was playing a game against Asami, and we don't have very many Thunders players here, so I don't have a huge amount of experience against it. But like I played against Asami, I brought Ophelia, and turn one, he managed to summon an Obsidian Oni, kill Rami, who was my Vendetta target, and then Fahatsu between turn one and turn two completely murdered Francois, who was my claim jump, and I was just like, "All right, this is a cool game. We're done." Look, I'm capped at 3 points at this point. Let's skip out. And then like the next game, I played Ma against Masaki, and a samurai killed my lucky emissary on the first round, and then on turn two, Mancharoha and Ma went into Fahatsu and did a total of 3 damage.
Oof.
Yeah. And after that, it was just a slaughter fest. Like, it was just bad. It was so I was a little sour after that. I was just like, all right, so I need a cleanser. So I've been playing Euripides, which is Savage is a fun keyword, and it's so much less straightforward than I thought it was going to be. Like, there's a lot of little tricks and things you can do with it. So it's sort of satisfying my kind of like mad scientist tendencies to sort of figure out like, how do I break this crew, and what interesting weird things can I do with it. So um yeah, Euripides is my new fun master, dropping 6 pillars on turn one directly into their deployment zone, possibly killing something, putting them at least a half, and blocking out like their entry, or getting out lanes, is kind of hilarious, honestly.
Yeah, and I have a local that has played quite a bit of Euripides. Um, so I've played against him numerous times, and it's I feel like every game with him is a little bit different because of the way that he can manipulate um well, not manipulate the control deck, but manipulate his ability to access cards when he needs them.
Hmm.
It, like, it's funny because he could have this weak control hand, and I'm playing against him, and like my opponent's not really cheating too much and flipping cards off the top and stalling activations, and then all of a sudden he sees that that high card, that Joker, that 13, that what have you, and then he seizes the advantage, activates a key model, and gets one or two big swings off when he has literally like no decent cards in his control hand at all. It,
No,
it, it can really, really change the pace of a game.
you can. So one of the fun things you can do is you can hold your hand. Look at it like, oh, I have the red Joker in my hand. Cool. I'm gonna hold my hand. I'm not gonna discard any cards for my hand, even if I've got a couple trash cards in my hand. I'm gonna hold that all in. And at the beginning of the turn, oh, I need to go first. I'm gonna cheat in this red Joker for initiative. Now the red
Hmm.
Joker now I win the initiative. Red Joker's on top of my deck. Old ways is gonna happen. that's a
Right, exactly.
that's a rough day. Like, suddenly, it's just like, oh, this is not gonna go well. This is not gonna go well for you.
Well, not one in a million, but it's a rare chance for something like that to happen. But if you manage to pull it off, like top of turn two, when all your models are already engaged with each other, and someone's going to have a
Yeah.
real bad
Like,
day.
all you need is a 12 atoms, a 13 atoms, or a red joker, and like you're cooking with gas. And that's you could probably get them. Like you're usually gonna bring Ancient Pact on at least one or two models, so you're cycling through there. Um, it's a it's a keyword that it reminds me actually a lot of like when I started playing Frontier for a little while. It's like on the surface you're going, this is a very straightforward back to front Malifaux uh keyword, faction. And then you start playing it and you're like, oh, but here this goes this way and this does this thing. Like I realized in a game I played the other day, an incorporeal Garyon can shoulder rush twice with the leyline token and make it from one token to the next because it's 12 inches between the two. So as long as the terrain lets you complete the pushes, he can just slide through and it doesn't worry about engagement or anything like that. He just like shoulder football rushes straight through and gets to the goalpost. So it's pretty cool. I like them a lot.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really cool keyword, and I feel like while it does have its weaknesses, I feel like it's underplayed, and I feel like that this kind of gets into a whole nother conversation. I kind of got into it with some folks on the Schemes and Stones Discord the other day because somebody was bashing Rasputina,
Yeah.
and I was I was like, I had to kind of bite my tongue a little bit, but I'm like, here's the deal. Just because there are other masters who might be quote better suited to a given situation doesn't automatically mean that the rest of the masters are bad. Like I don't this is get a real freaking tangent. This could be a whole other episode, but like I don't feel like there are very many truly bad masters in the game. And like I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of all the masters and all of the models and all their keywords, but I mean there are really only a few that stand out to me as being so underpowered as to be unusable in a competitive
Right.
format. Like Wong's one of them. A lot of people say he's great. In my opinion, in my experience, after playing 15 or 20 games with him, I can honestly say that I would never ever pick him in a competitive environment unless I knew my opponent was going to be taking one or two specific crews, and you
Yeah.
can't counterpick masters. That's not how the game
But it's
works.
like he's one of those. He's one of those that he works perfectly fine, and if you put the reps in, if you spend your time, you can make Wong do some work. However, you could do it with half the effort if you brought Ma. Like you're sort of like, if you want to do it to prove a point, by all means go ahead, but you're putting in a lot of effort for a master that's going to give you mediocre results, or keyword in general that's going to give you like mediocre results. Um, and if you go up against one of the like really like top level guys, then you're already playing kind of downhill. Like, you know, you're just, it's frustrating. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because the way I'm talking right now, I'm kind of talking against my own point, which was that just because there are better masters doesn't automatically mean that your master that you're talking about is bad. But like,
Uh, Gaining grounds has a lot to do with it, I think, too. I think that, Raspy is not the greatest in GG1. She was better in GG0. I think that Raspy is also always kind of like Boss. She's always going to be a board dependent master. There are times where you could look at a board and go, Raspy's just going to shut them out. Like Euripides is the same way. I'll look at a board and I'll be like, oh, this is a corner deployment. There's a giant piece of terrain right in front of them. All I got to do is step over here and block this. They literally have to go this way or spend their whole turn breaking down pillars to get out of it. Like that's great, right? Like that's what you want. You want to force them because once they funnel into that tunnel, you're just going to be there just murdering them, picking them off like one by one. Raspy's fantastic at doing that. If the board is more wide open and they have, like standard deployment is not the greatest for Raspy, just because they can spread out, they can, and if you're playing against Raspy, spread out. Like, do not, clump up into a little ball and think you're going to win the game. Like, spread out and give make the Raspy player have to decide who they're going to go after. Um, but
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it. Yeah, I'm not trying to say she's great. I mean, I have never played her. I have played against her like 3 times. It happens to be that 2 of the games that I've played against her have been with a very strong opponent on the other side of the table. Obviously, like I'm going to have an experience of Raspy being quite strong because they were paletted by a good player.
right.
One of them was a really bad matchup. Like whatever. I'm not saying Raspy's the bee's knees. Like, yeah, Sandeep's probably going to be better pretty much all the time. But yeah, just don't be so quick to say that masters suck, I guess is what I'm getting
Craig
at.
says it all the time. Player skill is going to almost always make the difference. A good player can pick up a mediocre master and crush people with them. And play style makes a big difference too. I'm a very control oriented player. I don't like big smash 'em up crews. I don't like Alpha Strike crews. Like, I will do it. I've been doing it with Euripides a good bit when I get that chance. But I am a control player. I like to force my opponent into bad decisions, and some masters play better than others into that role. Sommer, I guess the difference is like Oliver. So Oliver plays Sommer super aggressive. Like, he is in your face shooting you down turn one. I tend to summon a wall of Bayou Gremlins instead and start working on where I'm going to block out my schemes and where I'm going to stop my opponent from moving into that range. Both styles of play are correct. Both are.
Yeah.
Oliver's probably gotten better results tournament wise than I have, so it's arguable that his way is more effective. And in, like, especially, I guess, the sort of common American meta of Malifaux, killing things first is almost always the correct answer. But you can't scheme if you're dead. But that's just my style. I've always liked, the reason I moved from War Machine to Malifaux is that I didn't have to play aggressive every single time. That I could play more control and not have to worry about making a single mistake and then losing my Warcaster, and that's the game over. So
Yeah, for sure. So speaking of playing, different styles, and you talked about a little bit about playing Euripides, and obviously his crew tends to be, pretty full of big bruisers. I mean, I think like everything's min 3, which is
yeah.
yeah. So suffice it to say, all of his models can hit pretty hard. I mean, when there's a 6-stone minion hitting your master for min 3, that's pretty impactful.
Yeah.
But committing those resources, the AP, the cards, the wounds on your models with old ways, all that stuff can be kind of a murky pool. It can be difficult to suss out when you need to really truly commit, or when the resources that you are committing are going to be maybe not as fruitful as they need to be to win you the game. So i- in your experiences with Euripides specifically, and with just Malifaux in general, I know that kind of before the pod you said that one of the things that you found yourself struggling with as time has gone is seizing those opportunities, committing at the right time. So I mean, kind of tell me a little bit about your experience with that, and then we can kind of roll into a further conversation about my experiences, and how we can kind of improve
Well,
things.
I think one of the things about Malifaux is that it's an incredibly complex game. Like, it's so very rare that you can look at the board and say this is the only correct move I can make. Um, it, as the game goes on, I think you lock yourself into those places. You know, there are less correct moves on turn 5 than there are on turn 2, right? Like turn 2, you have a whole lot of positions and a whole lot of like options of things to do, and you can still, even if you make a tiny mistake, sort of course correct and fix things. Whereas at turn 4, turn 5, when you only have like 4 models left, there are less appropriate correct responses. So the thing, especially like learning a new crew, like I put Euripides down on the table. I've played him like twice before this, but this is the first time I'm like, I'm seriously going to play this guy. I want to learn how to play it. I just bought the entire keyword. So I'm going to paint him up. I'm going to learn how to play him. Um, and I go, the first thing I do is I go to the people that I know have played them before. And I say, okay, so give me your guys' idea of what you think is the best like strategies to play. So, Cody's played Euripides a little bit, so I went to Cody, like, what do you think? Dixon has played quite a bit of Euripides, so I'm like, all right, like give me your ideas. And I hear different things. I hear like Euripides is very aggressive, very alpha strike master. Like um Cody likes to play him, teleport him up on turn 1, and then just smash in. Like if if you're playing Recover Evidence and Euripides doesn't have to live to win you the game, then it's okay to throw Euripides up turn 1 and start smashing things and basically being a giant brick that takes 2 turns to kill, because he's never going to give your opponent points, and he's never going to lose you points if he dies. He's just there to block them in, slow them down, so you can get your pieces into place to do what you need to do. Whereas other people like to do, a little more safer, which is kind of bounce him up a little bit and then have him just spam pillars and, block out a large space of um, the board to get your opponent to waste AP having to smash pillars or move through or that kind of thing. So I've sort of like fallen into kind of a hybrid because I'm really bad at following the plot, and like going with the flow kind of thing. Like I always have to come up with my own ideas. Um, but learning that, when do I throw Euripides in, because generally Euripides is not a master that's going to make it to the end of the game. He's aggressive. He's a melee master. He doesn't have a huge amount of defense. Um, he's still surprisingly tanky for what he does. He is a master, so it still takes a good amount of work to get him down. But he's not like Armor 2 incorporeal. Well, he can't be incorporeal, but he's not like Armor 2 hard to wound. He just has hard to kill, and he's a big boy. Um, so that's been my struggle, I think, in the game, is learning like, when do I commit this big piece of my crew into the opponent's crew, because that's what he wants to do. He wants to get in there. He wants to smash things. Um, and it's important to think about like which crew you're facing, what your objectives are. Like I said, in Recover Evidence, throw him in there. Assassinates in the pool, maybe hold off, right? Like, um,
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of funny because, like, for anybody who's listened to the Capital City Crew podcast, it's a great podcast. I'd recommend it. They do a great job over there. They kind of have this like old drinking game of anytime they say "it depends,"
yeah,
and this whole topic is full of "it depends" kind of situations. Like, if anybody's tuning in hoping for hard and fast advice on what the right thing to do is to win the game, you ain't gonna get it in this topic, because every decision that you make about committing models, resources, AP, whatever it is going to depend so heavily on the situation that, like, John and I, or anybody, even players more experienced than us, it doesn't matter who it is, nobody can give you that hard, correct, accurate advice on how to spend your resources or how to commit them, because there is no right answer. I mean, people have talked about it on other podcasts. Like, Malifaux is not chess. Malifaux is not even Go, as Oliver's kind of talked about a little bit on some other pods. There, I literally can think of maybe a handful of situations in my entire Malifaux career when I look back at a game and I say, this one specific choice was the only correct one, was the only one that was going to lead me to victory, or was the only one that was going to lead me to a point. And like, you can break that down to kind of an inane level, like, well, you have to take this move so that you can move here, and then you can pick up this um, you know marker for a point, or what have you. But the order in which you do the activations, the order in which your opponent responds to your actions, what your opponent's control hand looks like, which you in most circumstances have no prior knowledge of, what kind of cards are going to get flipped, if you're going to flip black on a terrible occasion, or if your opponent's going to flip red. Like, there are so many unknowns that there are no quote unquote correct answers. And a lot of it is about reading the board, re- reading the knowledge that you have of the game state, meaning what are your objectives for scoring points, what does your control hand look like. And I mean, failing counting cards, is your deck flipping, you know a little light, is it flipping really hot? Like, have you been having a terrible turn full of flips, so that means your deck's probably on fire, you just need to get to it and maybe take a chance. Like, there's only so much information that you can bring to bear when you're making these kind of decisions. So those decisions to commit are going to be very much so unique to the game. So that said, since we can't give folks specific advice on how to handle those resources, John, what sort of things do you look for? And we'll again tie back to the whole Euripides thing, or you can bring in whatever else you
Mhm.
want. What sort of things do you look at in the game state and say, okay, now I need to commit Euripides. Now I need to commit Ma. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Could be a beater, could be a schemer, could be anything.
The number one, I mean, like, I think there's a couple aspects to it. Like, the number one thing for me is that I am even if I'm not playing Malifaux, I am an avid, like, reader of the cards. I spend a stupid amount of off time looking at other crews, and like, I like to talk to my opponent, especially if we're playing like a game where I want to learn something. And so I'll contact Dixon or Nathan, or you know and I'll say, okay, I want to play a game, we're going to play this pool, here's what I'm playing. And then they'll say, okay, this is the master I'm playing. So I'll take that time to take those couple days, go to that, look at this and say, what could they do? So, kind of having that meta knowledge of being able to understand, like, what can your opponent's crew do is huge to deciding, like, when you want to commit your stuff in. You don't want to throw Euripides in if their master can just turn around and melt him. Like, that's if you're playing against like Leviticus and you can't just go ahead and pop Leviticus right there, force him to eat a waif. Like, Leviticus is just going to murder Euripides. So throwing Euripides in right there is a bad idea. That's a place where you're going to go, okay, now it's time for ice pillars, right? Let's make um, he's not very fast, and Leviticus crew doesn't generally tend to have a lot of like extra actions. So unless they tech in Mad Dog, which they might, putting those pillars up first turn kind of forces him to have to do other things instead of coming to kill you. Because the bottom line is, playing Leviticus, he's going to point at one model, it's going to die. That's what's going to happen every turn. He's going to spend 3 AP killing one model. Sucks, but them's the breaks, right? So, like, having that meta knowledge of, oh, this is what that crew does, is helps you learn how to commit. Like, and it means there's a lot of trial and error. It really means, like, there's some crews that you're never going to understand until you drop them on the board, until they drop them on the board in front of you, especially with Explorers coming out. I played in the beta I was in like the kind of tail end of the beta, probably the last like 2-3 months of the beta. And so I probably played 20-30 games against different Explorer Masters, because for the most part what I did was I came in and said, I'm going to play my stuff, my best stuff. You play Explorer stuff. We'll see how it works. Because like before then, I had talked to Jamie, and there was a lot of like this Explorer crew playing this Explorer crew because everybody wants to play like the new stuff. So I was like, no, I'm just gonna come in and I'm just gonna play, my good stuff, and we'll see how it does. Um, but even with those 20 games, there's still, because Explorers is now out to the wider world, there's a lot of crazy stuff, right? Like somebody throws an archivist into a Jedza crew, and you're like, oh, this is bad. Like this feels awful, and I don't want to play this anymore. So there's a lot of trial and error. You're gonna lose. You're gonna get your butt kicked. The first time you play Jackdaw, he's gonna fling Jackdaw up the board, and you're gonna go, okay, cool, right? Like,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the two games, yeah,
but
2 games that I've gotten rolled in the worst of the entirety of my 3E Malifaux career were my first game against Kirai and my first game against Sandeep.
I believe it.
And
Terrible.
oh god, seeing it, and those are 2 crews where just reading the cards is no indication of how those crews are going to play out or how powerful they really are on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just the pieces don't click together. So at any rate, yeah, I think the meta knowledge piece is a very good
Yeah.
point. Having some prior knowledge of the way that your opponent's crew works
Mm-hmm.
is really going to help you figure out when and where you need to commit those resources. And that's a high bar. Like you
Yeah.
can't, as I just said, just reading the cards in your opponent's crew in the 10 minutes before a game starts isn't probably going to give you a good sense of how they
No.
operate if you haven't played against them before, but it's something.
I think the second level, it maybe should be the first level, but I think they kind of go hand in hand. The second level is like familiarity with your own crew and what they can do and how they work. Because one of the great things that I really like about third edition that second edition had, but I think because you played so many all-star lists, it didn't feel like it. Third edition crews really, really play differently, even inside of a faction. Taking a Trixie list is so much different than taking an Ulix list. It's so much different than taking a Big Hat list or a Swamp Fiend list. Like the different keywords really play differently. And so when you have an intimate knowledge of how my crew how scores points, what they're capable of scoring, and what they specialize in. When you learn those three things, you become better on the whole. And I really truly think, like, I know a lot of people are like, I hear a lot of people all the time like, well, I like Titania in Symbols of Authority, but she's not so great in ley lines, and I don't bring her for Public Enemies, or something like that. I'm sure that's not correct, but something like that. You always hear, well, I always bring this master for this. I kind of think that's a little bit of BS, because I think if you are really, really good with a crew, you can just about play any pool.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, there are going to be exceptions where you get a pool that's just so toxic for your crew that you're really, really going to struggle in it. But I mean, when 3E first rolled out, obviously everybody had all sorts of new toys. And I told myself, I'm learning the game. I'm learning, the way that this whole new keyword system works. I'm going to stick to one crew for 15 or more games. And I picked Ophelia because she'd always been my favorite master. Yeah, I'm not going to go on and on about how freaking dope Ophelia is, because anybody who has listened to me talk about her in the past is just going to be not wanting to hear about it anymore. But suffice it to say, I played her into literally, I think, 21 straight games at the start of 3E. Every single pool that came up didn't matter. I was playing Ophelia. And you know what? There were a lot of games where I only scored 4 or 5 points. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Because now I've got what I feel is an extremely strong grasp of the crew. And I stopped playing Ophelia for months and months and months and months while I worked on other stuff. And I feel like now I can go back, pick her up, and be just as sharp with her as I was,
Yeah.
after those first 20 games. It- If you're trying to learn, like, if you're diving into a new faction, to, kind of go off of what I was just saying and what John was saying, don't bounce around between 4 or 5 different masters. Kind of like I'm doing with 10 Thunders, where I've played like 3 masters and I have like 6 games in. Yeah, don't do what I'm doing now. I need to take my own advice. Stick to one master for a minimum of 5 games. And I feel like the 5, 10, and 15 game markers are really when you're going to unlock the way that a crew works.
Mhm.
In my experience, 5 games in, you've got a solid understanding of the base mechanics of the crew, and maybe you've been doing well, maybe you've been doing not so well. After 10 games, you're really going to have a strong sense of how the crew works. You're probably winning games at this point if you hadn't been. Um, 15 games, you should pretty much have the crew mastered. I can't really think of too many crews that you're not going to be able to just absolutely nail within that
I
time frame.
can.
Well, yeah, big hat
Yeah.
maybe, but yeah, I knew, yeah, exactly. So, and the other thing is, like, if you get 10 games in and you're not winning and you're not having a good time, it's not wasted time. It's not like you've gotten 10 games in with this master and you hate him and now you've wasted all this time playing these games. You're still playing Malifaux. You're still learning the way the game works, and now if you see that master on the other side of the table, you're really going to know how to deal with them.
Well, I do kind of have a small caveat to that. I really think that when you first start a faction, grab the master you think looks cool. Like just Malifaux's a game you can do that. It's awesome. The one of the worst things for me about um, War Machine is that when I first started the game, I picked up a Pharaoh crew. The pigs that were there, of course, I played Bayou here. I'll play pigs there. Um, and I really, really was like, these guys are awesome. This looks really cool. And I played it, and I just was like, "Ugh, this is not fun." Like Malifaux, you can see a crew that you really like, and generally you should be able to do well with that crew regardless. But it's perfectly okay to be like, I played 2 games with this keyword. It's not clicking for me. Let's just try this guy. And then when you find, but the important thing is when you find that one that clicks, when you find you play 2 games and you're like, oh, this is cool, right? Like this is neat. That's when you need to like dig in and be like, this is where I learn this faction because like bashing your head against the wall playing Lucius when you're not a control player is hard. Like, whether you like Lucius or not, like if he doesn't fit the sort of the I keep using the word playstyle, but I think playstyle is not really like the proper term for it. Maybe I'll think of it later, but like if it doesn't fit the way your brain works, you're gonna have a tough time. Like I played uh I played Nekema for the first time a couple weeks ago. I did fine. Nekema's a fine master. I did fine. It was okay. You know, it was okay. Like the first time I played Trixie back at the beginning of 3, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna pile what everybody else does in. I'm gonna pile in some bushwhackers. I'm gonna pile in some rooster riders. I'm gonna bring Ma. I'm gonna focus bomb everything. And this is dumb. Like, okay, like, but then now I have my test subject list, and I love it. Like I play that list every chance I feel like it's a good pull for that list, and I have fun. It's a crazy mad scientist stupid list. Like I, it catches people off guard, and it plays all of the weird, like strange ways that I play, and I enjoy the shit out of it. But that traditional sort of like throw things in and shoot things was just not doing it for me. So by all means, find like the keyword that really you jam with, and once you find that lock, like just keep rotating it through it, and play it until you know what this model does, you know what that model does, to where you're you have that first turn level of unpacking your crew pretty tight. Like, this is what I'm going to do this here, I'm going to move this guy here. um Especially if you like the crazy complicated stuff like I do, right? Like where your first turns are real important.
Yeah, and so I mean, once you get that level of comfort with your crew,
Hmm.
that's really, once you get into a tight matchup, that's really going to help you get some of the information that you need to determine when you're going to commit a master
Right.
or commit a model or what have you. So I'm going to throw a hypothetical situation at you, and there's going to be a lot of undetermined stuff. So just do your best to kind of fill in the blanks, John.
Okay.
So I've hopped on Vassal and I've drawn a hand of cards. So we're gonna say it's top of turn two. Um, you know, we're gonna say that initiative has been determined and you are going first.
Okay.
Your hand of cards is perfectly average. We've gotten suits. We don't really care about those right now. So we're gonna say you've got a 3, a 4, a 6, a 9, an 11, and a 13. So pretty much the most average hand that you could
Right.
possibly imagine in Malifaux. So you're going first. You've got one situation where you can move a scheme runner on the flank, score a point, and then you don't have to worry about that point anymore. We'll say it's the score a strat point, just for
Okay.
the sake of argument. So you can either take this Rooster Rider, run it up the flank, pick up a symbol, and then that symbol's done. Your Rooster Rider's done. There's nothing else really on that side of the board that can threaten it, but you've got your point. Or, given this hand of cards, the 3, 4, 6, 9, 11, 13, you've got Ma close enough to the center that you can dive her in and you can try and kill, an enemy beater model before it gets a chance to activate. So, knowing your opponent has stoned for cards, you didn't stone for cards. Theoretically, that means that his hand was lackluster.
Hmm.
You've got a pretty decent. What do you do in that situation and why?
That's an interesting one. Usually what I will do is I will hold, if my point isn't threatened, if I can score that point on my second activation or third activation safely, then I will probably activate Ma first. And try to take out a model, because when if you can delete a model that hasn't activated at the beginning of the turn, then you have taken away a resource from them, because that is an activation they don't get, and they're not going to get the pass token for it until the next turn. So that is going to automatically push you kind of up in the ranks a little bit of, you do I control this turn? And that answer is, yes. But that is, I think, only if you know that Ma is going to be able to take out that model. So if you look at your hand, you got two severes. So if you focus, you can drop that 13, hopefully get to a straight, swing in. So Ma is not going to go after a Soulstone user, because a Soulstone user can Soulstone to put you back on a negative flip. And then Ma's only doing 3 damage as opposed to doing, 5, 6, whatever. So you have to look at your target saturation. Like, where is Ma going? Is Ma going to be able to run in, take out one model, and tie up another model Or is Ma going to run in, take a couple swipes, maybe do some damage, maybe not do some damage, and then be sitting in the middle of their beaters waiting to get punched in the face?
Right. So exactly, and that was the kind of that was the wrinkle that I was going to throw in after you gave your answer was, now let's say the model is a Soulstone user and it's the only one that you can get, 3 attacks into, or a focused attack and a regular attack into. Or let's say your flank is now threatened. So you've got your Rooster Rider out there, and you know that as long as he doesn't activate whatever counter schemer he has on that side, your Rooster can just walk, pick up the thing, and score the point.
Mm-hmm.
But now you think to yourself, well, shit, if he goes with that model first and just engages my Rooster, now I can't score this turn on that side.
Correct. Yep.
But he's not going to do anything except for engage me. He's going to walk charge me, maybe get an attack. That's it. But he's going to stop me from scoring over there. So now how does that change the equation?
So if that Rooster Rider is not going to score you the point, then if you don't go first with the Rooster Rider and you don't have an audible, like there's no plan B to score a point this turn. Let's say it's symbols, and you don't have anybody else. You look at the board and you're like, nobody else is getting to a symbol this turn. Take the strategy point. Turn 2, you need to have the strategy point. It's
Right.
essential, especially if you're in a tournament situation where turn 5 is not always guaranteed. Take the strategy point. If you look at the board and you're like, Rooster's going down, turn 1, I got nobody else that can reach it. Or you look and you say, well, if I do this and then do this and then do this and maybe get this and then I get lucky here, I can get that point. Like, you don't want to be in that situation. You don't want to be in that situation where you're just scrambling to come up with an audible. Take the point. Like, take the point,
Right.
because that's, you need that point early. But if you can hold off on the point a little bit, chill, right? Um, Malifaux can be a game of sort of an ebb and flow of like who has control of the turn. So if you are in control of the turn, if you go into turn 2 and you're looking at it thinking there's very, very little they can do to really put me in a bad place where I can't score at least one strategy and at least one scheme this turn, then I'm okay. Then by all means, punch something in the face with Ma. But
Yeah. And it turns into a tricky one, because then you start thinking about all the other stuff that could happen during the course of the turn. And it's like, well, okay, so if he engages my Rooster, I'm like, okay, well, now I can't score the strategy on that side of the table. Awesome. That stinks. But then it's like, well, okay, well, now he's wasted his first activation just tying up my model so that I couldn't score. And it's like, okay, well, I can take, Ma, or I can take whatever other backup beater she has, and go kill something, go tie something up, go do some work with them. And then it's like, well, maybe if I wait until near the end of the turn, then I can go with this other model and move my Rooster or move his model, and then I'm back in a position to score. And it turns into this like never-ending cycle of assessing the situation, trying to decide what is the most effective way to spend your AP. And maybe there is a situation where you don't have an answer, you don't have an out, you don't have a way to score your point even after your opponent does what they can to deny it. And sometimes it just feels bad not to go with your master first on second turn when you can get 3 swings into something. You say to yourself, well, shit. Now, if I go with this Rooster and score my point, that's great. But then he's just going to go with, Eric or whoever. It doesn't matter what model it is. And they're just going to dive into, to Ma or to Trixie or to whatever other support model that I have. And he's going to freaking smoke them. And there's nothing I can do about it. And sometimes making that call to go for the point can just feel bad, but that's the way that you win the
Yeah.
game?
I mean, I think I played a lot of second edition versus Alex Schmidt, who if you didn't play in second edition, Alex was a fantastic player, probably one of the better players in the game. And one of the things I think that I saw from Alex, and I also saw playing against Cody because Cody was in our meta for quite a while, and just I played several Vassal games against Oliver, several Vassal games against Jamie Varney. And one of the things that those players have that is a key skill that I think is probably one of the most important things that they do, because like if you ask Cody, for instance, like what does so and so master do, he'll be like, I think they do this, like maybe they. So his knowledge of like what everybody does isn't encyclopedic, but Cody can look at a board and figure out who's in control, who is controlling the flow of the game at this present point in this turn. And that is a skill that doesn't come easily, but it's one that you can hone, because if you know who's in control, then you know like how to commit your resources. You can't commit your master into a position where I did against Misaki, for instance, and Fuhatsu in the game I talked about where I just lost badly. I ran Mancha in. I got 2 swings off with Mancha, and I thought it's Mancha Roja. He's gonna punch Fuhatsu. I got like a couple good cards in my hand. I got focus 1 on Mancha. This should be. He's got a shadow marker right next to him. Like this should be an easy crunch. I flipped, and he flipped, and he managed to beat me by 1 on the first turn after I had eaten the marker. And now Mancha doesn't have a marker, and so Mancha swings and does 2 damage because of armor. And it's like, cool. My biggest threat in the game just did nothing because I looked. I never should have brought Mancha in when he got a full hand of cards, and the highest card in my hand was a 12. Why did I do that? Like looking back on it, I'm like, why did I do that? Especially because I looked at it and went, oh, now Sadir's going to pop up and do not by your side, but I've got your back. Pull Fuhatsu out. Fuhatsu's going to light Mancha on fire. Okay, like that's
Exactly.
like
And that plays into the next hypothetical situation that I was going to say. So we've got exactly the same setup for the turn. Top of turn 2, you're going first. Now you draw kind of a what I would say is a crap hand, and it sounds like it's very similar to the hand that you had in the game that you played. So 2 1s, a 3, a 5, a 9, and a 12.
Yeah.
So at this point, it's like first activation. Do you go for the point, or do you commit Ma or Manja into the scrum?
See, at that point, I think I look to the other levels of my crew. Like, do I have a Bokor that's gonna allow me to sort of sculpt my hand a little bit? Can I afford to dirtle a little bit to kind of get a hand that I want? Maybe draw into some hot cards. Like, am I playing Bryn? Or like as a it's one of the things I think you should always look to put into your crews. You need a model that is going to be able to help you take a bad hand and take advantage of it, or find some way to maneuver it out. And almost every faction has a model that does that. Maybe they don't necessarily straight up draw you cards, but maybe they've got like tools for the job, or some other ability that lets you toss crappy cards to get better, or to fix your deck or to fix your hand, something to kind of help even out those bad hands. Because when you get those bad hands, you're basically saying, if you go in, you're saying, I'm gonna play a game of Yu-Gi-Oh here. We're gonna harder the cards. Let's hope you don't have the right, like I'm just gonna guess that you don't have a 13. And why would you do that? Like, because
Right.
like playing Zoraida. Actually, you just talked about Zoraida. I swear, every single time I've used Zoraida's bonus action, I have given my opponent a better hand than I got. Every time. I was playing against was it? It wasn't Dixon. Maybe it was. I was playing against somebody who was playing a Hinamatsu crew, and they had the Korafi duet, and I had a 13 of Tomes in my hand and a Severe in my hand, and I was like, yes, I am going to send the Lucky Emissary in. He is going to just pound them, right? Like just pound them. Um, and I took a crap hand and turned it into a solid hand, and I sent him in, and the guy and dude managed to flip another 13, like had a 13 in his hand to cheat. So I was on a negative flip instead of being on a straight flip, and I was like, I didn't kill the Korafi. The Korafi survived. Like, cool. I took the gamble, and you know, every time Zoraida does, it's just like I always feel like I just hand them like it's so hard. Like, if your opponent has a full hand, if your opponent has a full hand, it's very hard to commit your best beater into that scrum because all they need to do is put you to negative, right?
Yeah, and top of turn 2, you're looking at that hand, you get a 12, a 9, and then a bunch of other garbage,
Ugh.
and you think to yourself, "Well, I have to go with Manja because reasons." So you charge Manja in, and he swings for the fences, and you flip crap, and then you cheat in your 12, and then your opponent cheats a 13, and then you're like, "Well, crap, I've only got 2 attacks left."
Yep.
So you attack with your second one, and maybe you hit, maybe you don't, and then you pitch a card for flurry, and you end up cheating your 9 somewhere in there because you're just desperate to try and make the most out of Mancha's
Hmm.
activation, and now your hand is a 3 and a 1 and a 5, and your opponent hasn't even activated a model,
And they've ditched one card. And it's just,
and they
yeah,
one card.
yeah.
Right. And then Mancha just dies over the course of the turn, and you have nothing in your control hand that you can use to try and keep him alive.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
It's
So assessing your resources and using some of that meta knowledge, like what can your opponent do? Did he stone for cards? All that crap.
mhm.
It, it's definitely much more of an art than it is a science, and I think that that's something that we've both kind of spoken to over the course of this episode.
Yeah. And do they have soul stones for reduction? So the big boogeyman for a lot of people I hear is Leviticus. Leviticus is a scary dude, right? Like he can what min 4 basically with his trigger. Um, you can't use stones to stop to prevent. Always, always, always remember use stones to put him on a negative.
I
Mm,
think he actually has a trigger to make it so you can't do that
but he
either.
can't do both. He can't. He can't. You know what I mean? Like the big trigger for him is the decaying. What you call it? That lets him spend health to
Desolate
yeah,
Warden. Sorry, necrotic decay.
necrotic decay.
Necrotic
Same
decay.
thing that Haywarden
He
has.
has he has the Aetheric breakdown trigger
Yeah.
on his ranged attack.
Yeah. So when he's coming in on you in melee like that, use your stones to put him on negatives. Like if they don't have a lot of cards in hand, use your
Yeah,
stones to put yourself on a positive. Like
yeah,
you can't use your stones to heal against him, so don't just like waste them. Um,
yeah. No.
yeah, I
So the last thing that I wanted to touch on in this episode, and I feel like it's a big enough topic that you could kind of talk about it for a half hour on its own, but we'll try and do it concisely here. Is pass tokens and how they play into committing your models. So in my experience, Most of the vast majority of my opponents, including even at in tournament play, have not utilized their pass tokens very well, especially on first turn where they're the most important. So it's either that people forget about them or they get greedy and they want that +1 or +2 or +3 or plus whatever on the initiative for turn 2, thinking that winning initiative turn 2 is such a huge deal, which it can be. I mean, truly, it can be. I mean, winning initiative on turn 2 or turn 3 in some circumstances can certainly, drastically impact the outcome of the game or even change it. But using your pass tokens at intelligent moments in turn 1, I think can have a bigger impact on the way the game plays out than a lot of people realize.
Absolutely.
You don't I mean, I would say you don't necessarily wanna start your turn by using your pass tokens right away because then that's gonna key your opponent into the fact that you're actually planning on using them. So there's a little bit of, meta play there, but, you know, I tend to be a very cagey player, and I will burn low impact activations as long as I possibly can on turn 1 until the point where I'm like, I can only activate a high impact model.
Hmm.
That's the point that you want to use your pass tokens.
Yeah.
And when your opponent is expecting you to activate one of your high impact models, and then you throw in the pass token, it can completely catch them off guard if they're not expecting it, especially if folks have not traditionally utilized pass tokens very well against them in the past. So, recognizing the moment to use your pass token turn 1 so that you can guarantee last activation, or if you've managed to kill some unactivated models, potentially even a couple of activations at the end of the turn can have an absolutely enormous impact on the game because at that point, usually there's not a whole lot of hand pressure turn 1, so you've probably held some cards. If you've managed to bait your opponent into taking swings at some of your models and potentially burn some of their higher cards so that their hand is somewhat less strong than yours at the end of the turn, and then you get that last activation or those last two activations, and you can dive in with one of your high impact models, burn a couple of the high cards that you've had sitting in your hand, and kill something before it gets a chance to activate on turn 2. I mean, while that's not necessarily as impactful on the game state as killing a model before it activates turn 2, killing it turn 1 so it never gets the chance to is pretty much just as good.
Correct.
And most of the time on turn 1, the only thing they're gonna be doing with their AP is walking to get in range of whatever you're gonna try and smash them with. Um, so learning to recognize that key moment that this is the time that I need to spend a pass token, I feel like is one of the things that's that dividing line between a good player and a great player, and I by no means consider myself a great player. But I feel like that's a skill that I have worked on and developed over the course of my 3E career to the point that I think I'm pretty good at it.
Well, it's
So
like a mini game inside the game, right? Like you've got those two very impactful models, and they're just sort of like staring each other down, and you're like, this guy goes, like in an anime where the boss guy is like, you go fight this guy, and like they run off and fight each other, and like these two guys are just staring each other down until there's nothing else left to do, and then like that pass token is like, you know, you're playing that game of like which activations matter, which things can I do. Order of activations is it's such a huge skill, and it's not something anyone can just like show you how to do. That's why it's super frustrating. Like, you can play a game and you can have, Jamie or Cody or anybody like coaching you, behind the shoulder coaching you, and you're still not going to be able to really see, until you have all those things in play, until you can feel the flow of the game. You're not going to have that skill of like, when does this activate? When do I do this? How do I, when is this pass token super important because, like, let's say you're playing against an Everborn opponent. They're usually running at least one, if not two Ancient Pacts. You know that +2 is coming. There's 0 point almost in saving your pass tokens.
Yeah, you're gonna lose.
You're gonna
anyway.
lose. Yeah,
Anyway, it doesn't matter.
saving 2 pass tokens and then you lose anyway is no, like know when to use those things, because if they're running 2 Ancient Pacts, they're probably playing a very more elite crew, so they're looking to capitalize on pass tokens anyway. So if you get those tokens, use them in a way that forces them to activate that mature Nephilim early, or activate Nekema early, or get, like, more importantly, activate the Shaman early. If you can get them to activate the Shaman, or if you're playing like a Bayou player and you get them to activate that Bokor early, because you've got a threat right there ready to punch that Bokor in the face. Force them to activate that Bokor early so that they're wasting heals, instead of, oh, well, I go in, punch some things, and the Bokor activates, heals everything up, and your turn. Everything you did is just not only is wasted, they drew more cards too, so now they got a better hand.
Indeed. And you know what I love about playing against Neverborn players with the 2 Ancient Pacts thing is if I happen to be playing Ma with Trixie and I have Ill Omens +2, and then Ma uses a Ram on initiative and gives me 2 free pass tokens,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just flipping 2 middle fingers at my opponent, and they're just getting
Dude,
salty.
Ma
So
players,
salty.
Ma players, I think, most a lot of Ma players I hear talk about, the draw 2 cards is really good. Um, careful planning, careful planning is one of the best master only abilities in the game. And it's so versatile. Shielded is amazing. Moving models like that push, or it's not even a push, it's a move. Moving models is like,
Yeah, situationally brilliant.
yeah, you got a 2-inch melee model, you push it to the edge of its engagement zone against 3 other models. You've basically given 3 models slow.
Yeah.
That's great.
But I mean, generating pass tokens,
Mhm.
any ability that generates pass tokens, I would consider to be one of the strongest in the game. And like that was the whole shtick with well, not the whole shtick, but part of the whole shtick with Tara and Aeonis is the fact that he could generate pass tokens, in the middle of the turn, which
Mhm.
is I feel like still an incredibly powerful ability, and I'm sorry that it requires a suit now. And I know that Tara has other issues with GG1, but I mean, like, let's be real here. Just because it requires a suit now doesn't mean that it's not a good ability
No,
in generating
it
pass
is. It is a
tokens.
good.
Something that not many models can do. So it's like him and Ma and a handful of other models. Yoku's crew is just rife with pass tokens, and I dearly love playing them. I just don't love playing her because
She's all right.
reasons.
She's all right.
She's the Wong of Ten Thunders.
No.
Um, but yeah. So at any rate, pay attention to your pass tokens. Actually use them. Don't just hold them for initiative. Don't forget about them. And that I think is probably one of the things that will have the most impact on you committing your resources at the right time.
And I wish
So
that I could give like uh, well, I do and I don't wish that I could give a blanket statement, because once again, that's one of the strengths of Malifaux, is that there is no blanket statement. But the bottom line, when you're looking at when do I commit things, when do I to my your hand, your scoring, your pass tokens, is you have to look at what is it going to get me. I-
yeah,
If it if you throw your big beater master in the first of the turn, and even if you have a god hand, right? Like, let's say you have minimum 4 Severes in your hand, right? And a red joker. Even if you have that, and you take your master and you fling them straight into, you get greedy. You get greedy. You look at that hand and you're like, I can take out anything they got. So you throw that master into their big beater, probably a soulstone user. probably has some sort of defensive ability, and you spend all 4 of your big cards, but you kill that model, and now you have 2 cards left in your hand. Like, what's the rest of the turn going to do for you? Congratulations, you've killed that model. Maybe you got really lucky and that model was their claim jump model, right? Like, and you've denied them 2 points, and that's best case scenario. Or you just scored assassinate, best case scenario. But you now have the rest of your turn with 2 cards left in your hand, and your opponent knows it, right? Like, they know it. They can look at your hand and see you've got 2 cards. You just tossed the majority of your severes into the deck, in the discard pile. Like, that, they can do whatever they want. They now have kind of a free reign to go do whatever they want because your scariest cards are gone.
Yeah, and maybe, like you said, maybe Yu-Gi-Oh! Heart of the Cards ends up biting him in the ass, and maybe it doesn't. But leaving all that to
Maybe.
chance is
Maybe.
risky.
But I mean, I can't tell you how many times when I'm like, oh, this guy's on a negative flip. My model should be fine, and they flip two moderates, and they still 4 damage, punch you in the face.
Next time you talk to Adam, or we have you on the show and he's on, ask him to tell you about my ridiculous luck with flipping double moderates on negative flips for damage. It's kind of stupid.
my model for that, and she is a moderate, negative flip moderate, like, magnet, is Melissa Core. I cannot tell you how many times I play her, and it's like, oh, I'm on a negative. I'll shoot anyway. Oh, cool. I just flipped 2 moderates. That's 4 damage and a blast. Or I flipped 2 severes. That's, oh, your entire Hamlin crew is gone now. Sorry. Like,
Okay. All right. Well, it's about time to wrap this bad Larry up. So, you got anything else to add, John?
not too much. I'm gonna try to be more consistent with my blog. It's 2021 is 2020 in disguise. So I'm not as consistent as I want to be, but I will be.
Yeah, don't forget. I mean, March 2020 was just 3 months ago, right?
I told my kid today, because she was like, this year's really feel like it's flying by so fast, and I was like, well, that's because it slowed down last year. And she's like, what? And I was like, yeah, time slowed down last year. You notice how long last year felt, right? It's like, yeah. And I was like, so now it's got to speed up to catch up because it has to right itself. So time really is going faster because it's slowed down. She believes me. I'm a terrible parent, but
Nice. All right. Well, thanks for joining me, John. That was good stuff.
Absolutely.
And we look forward to having you on the show again.
I always enjoy it.
Take care and stay weird, folks.